I just talked to Annie Jacobson. She wrote a book on nuclear war, a scenario of how a nuclear war will happen second by second, minute by minute. I apologize. If it happens, how it would happen is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying how easy it is to start, that one person can start it, first of all, and then there's no way to stop it. Even potentially with tactical nuclear weapons, that it's just the machinery of it, how clueless everybody is, combined with the machinery of it, it's just impossible to stop. And it's just between Russia and the United States especially. And then all of a sudden you have nuclear winter and 5 billion people are dead.
Yeah.
And they die through just essentially torture, slowly. How do we avoid that? How do we avoid a nuclear war? That's something that you talk about and think about. How do we avoid this kind of escalation of a hot war?
I think the most essential thing, first of all, is understanding exactly what you have just detailed. We are in this very strange and absurd time where we have talking heads and so-called pundits on TV. We have politicians. We have people who are talking about a nuclear war as though it is a war that can be won, period, and a war that can be waged somehow without that risk of escalation to the point of destruction of human civilization. And so they talk about this as though it's just another war, and especially as they talk about the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Oh, well, this is small, and we think it'll send a message without actually escalating to the point where we're dealing with the kind of destruction that we witnessed in World War II. That's a dangerous thing when it becomes like normalized as, well, we've got this new missile that'll go and it's targeted and it's strategic and it'll only harm this quote unquote military target. Ronald Reagan was 100% correct when he said, a nuclear war cannot be won and should never be waged. It was true then, and it's true now, no matter how much these guys who are producing these weapons or those who are benefiting from that industry try to tell us, oh no, it'll never happen. So to me, that's an important first step to continue to inform and educate and sound the alarms to people. Don't buy this crap because it's not true. And I look forward to listening to your podcast. But the PSA that was put out by New York City's Emergency Management Office about what to do in the event of a nuclear attack, you would find it funny if it wasn't so deeply disturbing. How they created this public service announcement, they distributed it everywhere across the city, on the internet, I think it was on the radio, where you had a woman who appeared to be an actor coming in and saying, hey, in the event of when the big one hits, here's what you should do. Focus on doing these 3 things. And I'm paraphrasing, but I encourage you to watch it. I'm paraphrasing, but she said, get inside, and stay tuned. That was it. And, get inside, go away from the windows. Stay inside, don't go outside until you get the all clear. And stay tuned. Follow our account on Instagram and Twitter. And at the very end of this short PSA, she said her closing words were, "We've got this." Mm-hmm. And it was so disturbing in that it was so completely out of touch with reality. It creates this kind of false sense of security that, okay, well, it's kind of like, here's what you do when a tornado hits or when a big storm hits. And categorizing the big one, a nuclear attack, within that same kind of preparedness that you would want people to have in the event of a natural disaster of some sort. And it is reflective of the carelessness with which people in our government, that careless attitude that people in our government have towards nuclear war and a nuclear attack, even as they set us up for failure in pushing us to the closer and closer to the brink of a nuclear war occurring, whether it be an intentional attack or, as we saw during the last Cold War, one that could be launched unintentionally. How many near misses were there during the last Cold War? I saw this documentary called "The Man Who Saved the World," and it was some like mid-level officer who happened to be on duty and who didn't do what he was told in launching the nuclear missiles because of what they thought was an incoming attack, and it turned out to be a complete mistake or misread on the radar. But that's what we're facing.
But by the way, there's so many things to say there. But one of the things that Annie Jacobson details is just how organized the machinery of all of this is, where the humans involved don't have to think. They just follow orders. There's a very clear set of steps you take, and there's very few places where you can inject your humanity and be like, wait a minute, what's the big picture of this? The only person that can think is the President of the United States. The President of the United States gets 6 minutes after the warning. The early warning system says, whether it's false or not, says that we believe that there's been a nuclear weapon launched. You have 6 minutes before you can make the decision of launch back, initiate. And to me, that's what I'm voting based on.
Right.
In the current situation, you really have to see that as one of the most important aspects.
I agree.
Of the United States president is, who do you trust in those 6 minutes to sit there? And I'm not really sure, looking at Biden and Trump, boy, I don't know. But I do know that I would like somebody who's thinking independently and not part of the machinery of warmongers. That's really, I mean, it's, I don't want to make it sound cynical or dramatic, but sometimes in such scary situations, in such dramatic situations, you kind of follow the momentum.
Yes. When
the right thing to do, the right thing for a leader to do, is to step back and look of all of human history.
Yeah.
And ignore all the people in the room that are like saying stuff, because most likely what they're going to be saying is warmongery type of things.
Yes.
That's one of the things why I also get criticized for. I still think Zelensky's a hero for staying in Kiev. Everybody was telling him to flee. It was all the information was basically saying this, the world's second biggest military is like coming at Kiev. It's just dumb on all fronts to stay in Kiev. But that's what a great leader does, is ignores everybody and stays.
Yeah.
Screw it. I'm going to die for my country. I'm going to die as a leader. And that's the right thing for a leader to do.
It's sad that, I mean, that to me, that's what we should expect of our leaders.
Yes.
Is exactly that. And it's sad that having a leader in that position fulfill their responsibility and the oath that they take is seen as a heroic act, when we should, like, that's your job. That's what we elect our leaders to do. And yet so many have failed. But to your point, it's not cynical at all to know that in those rooms, especially in these moments of crisis, unfortunately, there are the predominant and prevailing opinion of this warmongering establishment that's not specific to one party is the knee-jerk reaction, which is to go to war or to execute an act of war. And this is one of the biggest costs of this establishment, destroying the reputations of and smearing and trying to cancel and censor those who are voices of peace, or just those who take a contrarian position and say, well, hey, why don't we just pause for a moment and actually think this through? Why don't we talk through what happens if we take this course of action? What happens if we go down a different path? Let's actually be thoughtful about what our options are for A, B, and C, and then make the decision in a thoughtful manner based on that. Even advocating for that is seen as a kind of heresy in the warmongering establishment in Washington, and the cost of this, the cost of their retaliation against those who are reasonable voices who look at the world as it is, not some fantasy that they wish existed, is in those rooms during those critical moments, people will, even if they know in their heart or their mind that this could end really badly, their instinct is to self-censor and not speak up because they don't want to experience the wrath and ire, whether it be coming from 4-star generals or the secretaries of state or defense or these high-ranking people in positions of power and influence. They don't want to be the one guy in the room who's just like, hey guys, let's just take a breath and actually think this through. What will happen, not just in the immediate response of this action that you're advocating for, but what are all of the other people, other actors, stakeholders in the world? How will they respond? And then how will we respond to them? How will they respond to us? Actually go through this exercise of, in the military, this is commonly referred to as, what are the second, third, fourth order of effects that will occur as a result of pursuing a specific course of action?
It's weird how difficult it is to be that person in the room.
It requires courage.
Yeah, but
which is sad, but it requires courage.
But why does it require, like, even just to ask, okay, we've been in Afghanistan and Iraq for this number of years. What's the exit plan?
Right.
Just bring that up like every day at a meeting.
Yeah.
Like what's the exit plan? It's strange that gets criticized. Well, the war in Iraq and so on. But I just remember there was this pressure you can't quite criticize or like ask dumb questions about, wait, what? Why are we going into Iraq again? Like,
but they're not dumb questions.
Right. In retrospect, you're like, oh, they're not dumb questions at all.
Yeah.
But it actually required a lot of courage to ask them while still working within the institution. It's easier if you're like an activist from the outside saying,
sure,
no war, this kind of stuff. But within the institution, in the position of power, to ask the questions like, maybe let's not.
Yeah.
It seems really difficult. And the same kind of thing in the war in Ukraine and just any kind of military involvement. Again, I guess the cynical interpretation is that it's the military-industrial complex that permeates the halls of power.
It does. And what is behind the military-industrial complex? And there are different examples of this. You can look at the pharmaceutical industry as well. There's a huge amount of money and a huge amount of power that wields tremendous influence over members of Congress. There are different examples of this, across different sectors of our society. But I think the military-industrial complex over time has proven itself to be the most powerful and influential, and that's what is behind it. This is why they try to destroy anyone who dares to ask the most obvious questions. Is because it is about power and wielding power.
Well, the cool thing about the United States president is they have the power to say "F you" to everybody in the room. I think seems like they don't quite take that power. Like people will say like, yeah, the U.S. president doesn't have that much power. I don't know about that. Just like if you look at the law, especially in military, when you're talking about war and the military, they have a lot of power.
Yes.
So they can fire everybody. Like they have a lot of power. They can stop wars. They can start wars. They have a lot of power. The
position of the presidency certainly does. Unfortunately, we have people too often who assume the presidency from a position of weakness because they're afraid of losing power.
Sure.
And so they make those calculated decisions not based on what is right, or for the right reasons, but instead driven by fear of loss of power and loss of influence. And that's where, especially given all that we are facing, we need leaders in the presidency and in Congress who have courage to be that voice in the room, to ask about, to remain mindful of and rooted in the Constitution,